Hi everyone, welcome back to another EOC lesson review lesson number 6. So in this particular lesson, we're going to quickly review a couple of topics, including evolution and origin of life, evidence of evolution, and so on. So the first we're going to talk about one of the most commonly um, popular concept in biological evolution is natural selection. So natural selection, the idea of natural selection is put forward by Charles Darwin, and during his travel across the world, voyage across the world, and he collected avid flora and fauna. There's a lot of animals and plants he collected, and then he came up with this theory of natural selection. So here's an example of the process of natural selection. So I hope you remember we talk about the rock pocket mice as an example for natural selection. So here we have same concept here. So a population of mice has moved into a new area and where the rocks are very dark, and due to natural genetic variation, some mice are black and white, others are tan. So you can see that the predators who is flying above is actually um, can easily see these light colored mice, and you can see the number of mice is decreasing over time because of the predation. So the tan mice are more visible to predatory birds than the black mice. Thus, the tan mice are eaten at high frequency than the black mice. Only the surviving mice each reproductive age and leave the offspring. So only these darker ones, the black ones, are reaching, successfully to the reproductive age, so they could pass their alleles or the genes to the next generation. And you can see that over time, this black mice number is increasing. So we call the number of alleles or the allelic frequency or the genotype frequency. So the black allele is increasing in the population over time, and the number of black mice, which is genotype, is increasing over time. So this change in the allele frequency over time is actually called natural selection. So the natural selection has underlying concepts like overproduction. The organisms have to overproduce, and the one that fit well with the environment, which is called the survival of the fittest, that you see here, the black ones are surviving in the black background and the other number is decreasing. So this is called natural selection. So now we're going to talk about the 5 mechanisms of natural selection and how this natural selection work. There are 5 factors that we have identified for the natural selection. First one is random mutation. So you can see the mutation is a random component and it can happen at any time. A mutagen or any chemical or any ultraviolet radiation or anything that causes mutation is called the mutagen. So that is one of the reason why the allelic frequency or the characters changes. The next one is gene flow. Gene flow is the flow of gene from one generation to another. And you can see that the sexual fertilization or through the pollination, these pollen grains are transferred from one plant to another. So what is happening here is this one trait or the character from one plant is passing on to the another one in the next generation after generation after generation through sexual reproduction. That is called the gene flow. Another one is non-random mating. Non-random mating is a process in which, especially when you look at the plants, inbreeding is most common form. It does not alter allelic frequency at all, and it changes the proportion of the heterozygotes in the individual. So organisms, they pretty much go for non-random mating, especially the animals. They pick their mate who is stronger and successful in the population. So that will change the allelic frequency because some of the organisms are excluded by the female since there's a lot of behavioral isolations that will limit at one particular organisms to pick go for a better or a smartest one or the strongest one in the population. And the next one is the genetic drift. Drift is a condition where a sudden loss in the allelic frequency of the organisms sudden drop in the allelic frequency due to some random event. It could be either some kind of natural disasters or anything that will destroy a group of organisms. So in this case, it's a separation right here. Some kind of flood or something happened, and these two bird population has been separated, one in this group and another one in this group, and eventually this may develops into a new species that is called the genetic drift. Sometimes it could be any kind of hunting or man-made disasters can drop, kill a large amount of population that will drop um, the number of organisms in the population. So the next one right here is the natural selection. So you can see that the bird is picking these yellow ones and leaving the green ones because they are better camouflaged. So these are the five mechanisms in which evolution happens. The next, we're going to talk about the evidences of evolution. So there are six evidences. I'm going to quickly go over it. First one is the fossil evidences, and you know that the fossils are deposited in different layers in sedimentary rock. The older one is going to be at the bottom, and the recent one is going to be on the top. So that's how they figured it out. So who is the ancestor of what? And then that's how the evolutionists they look into this fossil evidences and figure it out. It's pretty much a visual record. You can actually see. So we came to know about the dinosaurs existed before from the fossil records. And the second one is the homologous structures. The homologous structures are the structures with the same structure but a different function. For example, wing of the bat, flipper of whale, and arm of human. They all have the same anatomy inside. They all have the same type of bones, but they are modified to perform different functions. So this shows that all these organisms came from one common ancestors. Another one is vestigial structures. Vestigial structures are the structures which had a function but no longer do its function. And example vestigial hind limbs of modern whales, and also our appendix, human vermiform appendix. So these are said to be well developed and had a function in the ancestor's body, and due to the course of evolution, so it has been disappeared according to evolutionarist. So these structures shows that organisms had common ancestors before. Another one is analogous structures. They are unrelated organisms, similar physical structure. For example, wing of bat, wing of bird, and wing of butterfly. So they all have wings, but they are different origin. So what does that tell? Is these organisms evolve in a same environment, developing same trait. The next evidence is molecular biology. In the last couple of decades, the molecular biology and the DNA analysis and protein studies have been tremendously improved. So the scientists study their amino acid or DNA sequence, and compare with the other organisms so we can relate them. If those, you can see the example sequence of human hemoglobin, which is a blood protein that carry the oxygen, is identical to chimpanzee, while less closely related to the primates have greater differences. So these evidences will tell that who is our most recent common ancestor. Yeah, next and last evidence is embryology. Embryo is developing fetus. So similarities in the early development of the vertebrate embryos shows that we all the organisms came from a common ancestor, because in the embryonic stage, if you compare the embryo of a fish or a salamander or a human and a reptile, in early stages they all looks the same. So this shows that these organisms came from a common ancestor. The next one we're going to talk about is endosymbiotic theory. So what is this theory talks about is this theory explains how eukaryotes, or like organisms like us, evolve or came from the tiny organisms, which is the prokaryotes. So what you see here is in the primordial soup concept. That means in the early stages, the earth was covered with water, and then it started cooling down. So during that time, so you can see that's a time here, ancestral prokaryotes had just a plasma membrane, DNA, and cytoplasm. So this is a prokaryotic cell. And we have another large prokaryotic cell, and you can see this cell membrane has a lot of enfoldings. And guess what happens? This, over time, these small organisms, like small prokaryotic organisms, got inside, that's what you see right here, engulfing or eating other aerobic heterotrophic prokaryotes. And in this case, it is engulfing photosynthetic prokaryotes. So there are different prokaryotes that were just, roaming around, and some of these large cells got trapped with the aerobic prokaryotes. Some of them got trapped with the photosynthetic prokaryotes, and they just establish a kind of symbiotic relationship. That means that this is getting these, or these found a better room there, and then they are working, and it is helpful for this large cell, and that's how we got the eukaryotic cell. And you can see that they eventually turn into a mitochondrion and the plastid, which is chloroplast. So this turned into a photosynthetic plant cell, and this turned into an animal cell. You can see that this one do not have chloroplast, so this become an ancestral heterotrophic eukaryote. This became a heterotrophic prokaryote. This all came from the prokaryote. So this shows that new eukaryotes evolved from by engulfing. Endo means inside, symbiotic means both are benefited. So they just engulf or eating inside, eating, and then they are living together pretty much. So that's how we got these eukaryotes, modern eukaryotes. The last and the final one is biological evolution evidence by Miller and Urey experiment. So Miller and Urey, American scientists, they just recreated the ancient Earth. What they did was they just boiled water, as you can see that, it's the water vapor. This simulates the ancient Earth. And here they created some electrodes to create the spark. And this chamber is mixed with CH4, which is methane gas, NH3, which is ammonia, and hydrogen. These are the three gases existed in the early Earth. And then they provide some electrodes. Electrodes are simulates the electricity, which is nothing but the lightning at that time. And then under this high electric spark, these molecules combine, and then what they did was there's a condenser chamber, which is a cooling chamber, which is a cold water is running through. And then this water they collected through this flask and right here. And then when they analyzed this sample, what they found out was this molecule, this water contained organic compounds. Organic compounds are like proteins and carbon containing organic compound that makes our life, like macromolecules, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids, carbohydrates. Those are the organic compounds. So they could find the traces of those molecules in this condensed water. So what are these three molecules? These are inorganic molecules. These are not organic molecules. These are just inorganic molecules, CH4, NH3, H2. So this were there in the early atmosphere. This has been converted into organic compound, and these organic compounds created a foundation for modern life. So this is a hypothesis that Miller and Urey tried to prove, that the organic compounds can form from inorganic compound. And I hope this is helpful. Please go ahead and take the quiz. Thank you very much.